Hello and welcome to the arcade. You know, the Super Mario series is one that's synonymous with gaming, and it's pretty easy to see why. The Super Mario games have been revolutionizing platformers ever since that first one came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System all the way back in 1985. And that status as revolutionary was even further cemented with the release of Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64 in 1996. But there is a huge difference between these two games. Yeah, they both have Mario and take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. We fight Bowser and his minions while searching for the princess, and we use different items and power-ups to help us out along the way. But for all their similarities in how symmetrical these two games feel, one of them is 2D and the other is 3D. Yet they're rarely contrasted and compared as two totally separate types of experiences and games. They're both part of the same franchise after all. And Super Mario is one of those rare franchises that has actually kept its 2D entries around after making the jump to 3D. And it's just crazy to me to think that the level of quality from the 2D games to the 3D games is not that much different, and how we all just kind of accept them as being two sides of the same coin. All that said, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the history of 2D Mario games and 3D Mario games, and kind of compare and contrast the different entries in this series. So here we go. Here is 2D Super Mario versus 3D Super Mario. Super Mario Bros. Released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, and it was one of the most revolutionary video games of all time. 2D side-scrolling platformer games had been done before, but in mine and many others' opinion, never to this level of quality, precision, and excellence. It was rare at that time that a side-scroller game would move so smoothly, and that smoothness and the responsiveness of the controls would go on to be two of the greatest defining features of the Super Mario games. In this original game, and many to follow, we get the classic side-scrolling elements. We walk or run from left to right, we jump over obstacles or on top of enemies, and sometimes collect power-ups to help us take an extra hit or deal damage with a fireball. And that's pretty much it. Simple, right? The rest of the greatness of Super Mario is the level design and the preciseness of the control. Other platformer games rarely top the level of fun and brilliance on display with the Super Mario series. Other games may be more realistic in their platforming. For example, plenty of platformers, good ones even, have a long delay from the time you press the jump button to when the character actually jumps. This can be due to a couple of things, either normal input lag or due to an animation making it look more like a real jumping motion. But you won't find any of that in the Mario games. As soon as you press that jump button, Mario is flying off the ground, no matter what. The original Super Mario Bros. Game is not too hard, but maybe harder than some people think. It's definitely accessible like most games in the series, and can be mastered by gamers young and old. On the NES, Super Mario Bros. 1 and 3 are some of the most renowned titles, with Super Mario Bros. 2 and the Lost Levels also having their own dedicated, albeit much smaller, fan base. When you ask people today to think of Mario, I believe they will probably think of something like the design of Mario from Mario Galaxy or Mario Odyssey, or something similar, but in total there are more than double the amount of 2D Mario games as there are 3D Mario games. In fact, there were 7 games released in the Mario series that were 2D before the first 3D one ever came out. Super Mario 64 released for the Nintendo 64 in September of 1996, and it was the pioneer of not only moving the Mario series into the 3D realm, but also for pushing 3D platformers in general forward into the eyes and minds of the gaming world. Super Mario 64 being in 3D put an emphasis on exploring open environments rather than just running and jumping through a level to reach the end. There were a ton of different objectives and non-linear paths through these levels, and each level contained multiple stars, resulting in a bunch of different ways to replay each level. Nintendo really made great use of the number of environments they created for this game, creating just the right amount of different stuff to do in the same level before the player would get too bored of it. After the move to 3D, Mario needed an updated moveset. The backflip, triple jump, wall jump, punch, and dive were just some of the new things that Mario could do. The level of freedom you have over what Mario does is something that really makes the Super Mario games stand out from their competition. You have all the tools you need to navigate the environments in many different ways, and pretty much no matter how you play Mario, you're going to have fun while doing it. I've already mentioned before, but the level design of Super Mario is one of the main features that elevates it above most, if not all other platform games. The 2D Super Mario games are mostly designed with a clear start and end point with obstacles and enemies to get in your way. Throughout most of the early levels of the 2D Mario games, the game teaches you the basics and shows you how to anticipate certain patterns in the design and enemy placement. But later levels will ramp up the challenge quickly and put all the skills you've learned to the test, requiring super precise platforming challenges to be mastered and perfectly timed jumps to be pulled off to advance to the end of the stage. The level design stands on its own regardless of the graphics or aesthetic. That's proven by how well the original Super Mario games still hold up to this day. That being said though, these games do have some of the best graphics on their respective systems. The iconic level themes like grasslands, deserts, water worlds, and castles are now staples of the platforming genre, used in all different kinds of games to this day, even outside of the Mario series. And as good as these games look, they are taken to the next level with their smoothness. In all the 2D games, you pretty much have a locked 60 frames per second and flawless screen scrolling to make for some of the most satisfyingly beautiful gameplay and graphics combinations in all of gaming. Most of the 3D Super Mario games radically depart from the formula of the level design from the 2D games. While a clear starting point may be defined, the player is encouraged to explore the open environments to find their own path through the levels, exploring to seek out more obvious objectives and experimenting to find hidden ones. This all started with the first 3D entry, Super Mario 64, where you can enter a painting in a room to enter a level that provides multiple different ways to end the level, that being the different stars to collect that all have their own unique prerequisites. That may be finding a lost baby penguin, or outdoing someone in a race, or collecting all the red coins in the level. But whatever it is, all that variety is neatly packaged into one big level that feels immersive, expansive, and packed full of life, color, and creativity. Similar to the 2D Mario games, the 3D ones also have grasslands, deserts, underwater areas, and castles, and although the 3D Mario games may tend to have less levels overall, they probably have the same or more total objectives because of how many stars, shines, or moons there are to collect in each level. As far as the gameplay goes, the Super Mario games in my opinion have set the standard for 2D platforming. It's fast-paced, based mostly on reflex and learning patterns rather than memorizing level layouts. It's really rewarding and super satisfying once you reach that level where you feel like you can run through a level and rely on your skills that you've developed to carry you through to the end with little to no issue. The 2D Mario games are very straightforward by design and intend that anyone from kids to adults can pick up and play and have fun and learn the rules of the game super quick. That said, there is still a level of mastery required to actually beat these games, especially the older titles. They aren't the hardest games of all time or anything like that, but you won't be able to just blast your way through the final levels like you can do in the early levels. With the 3D games, the design philosophy is based more on immersion, with a depth and scale unmatched by a lot of other 3D platformer series, allowing the player to find their own way to play in a world with so much to do and so much fun to be had. Within the 3D environments, players are able to learn and use Mario's skill set to adapt to many of the different obstacles, enemies, and platforming challenges, leading to some pretty complex interactions as the games progress towards the end. Typically, by the end of 3D Mario games, you'll have so many moves memorized that you will feel like the controller and Mario is just an extension of yourself rather than a foreign object on the screen. You really feel the game world come alive as you push farther and farther, becoming better and more equipped in your knowledge and skill to take down anything these games throw at you. While the 3D games differ from the 2D games in some ways, in a lot of ways they're the same. There's still that precise platforming, but there's also new additions of more complex puzzles and more open environments to explore. And sometimes you have to get pretty creative with the ways in which you navigate these open environments too. Not everything is going to be in plain sight. You will have to use the tools that you developed throughout the game to unlock some of the tighter kept secrets of these games. The Super Mario series is one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time. The series has sold more than 380 million units all across the world. The Super Mario games appeal to almost every gamer in some way. Whether it's the 2D games or the 3D ones, almost everyone can see the value and the fun that is offered from this timeless series. Not only gamers, but developers as well have seen the value and importance of these games, using them as inspiration for their own games, leading to countless other platformers and indie games, some of which have excelled in their own fields and shared some of the success offered by that timeless platforming formula. Games like Celeste, Super Meat Boy, Shovel Knight, and Braid all owe a lot of their creative inspiration to Super Mario, and are all the better for it in my opinion. And as far as the 3D games go, without 3D games like Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey, we may never have gotten the amazing games like Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, and so many other countless 3D platformers that I could spend entire videos talking about. One thing that doesn't get brought up that much is the 2D games versus the 3D games. For example, which ones are better? Are either of them better? Sure, most of it comes down to preference, but don't most of us play both the 2D games and the 3D games as well? We may play more of the 2D games because there's simply more of them, and they might also be just a tiny bit more accessible. But overall, I'd argue that the 2D games and 3D games all still really feel like the same beating heart. I said it before, but they're like two sides of the same coin. One allows you to run and jump to get to the end. The other allows you to take a bit more time to explore before running and jumping to get to the end. In the end, the 2D games and 3D games all feel like Mario. And a lot of that is due to the controls and how responsive each game feels and how tightly controlled Mario tends to be. And that may be, as far as design is concerned, the biggest thing to set Super Mario apart from other series of platformers. There might never be a clear answer as to which games are better, the 2D games or the 3D ones. Some would argue that the 3D Mario games are better because they have more in them, more to see and do and explore, and they're a more rare form of release for Nintendo. Others would argue for the 2D games because they're more concise and more accessible and offer a different level of challenge that the 3D ones can't seem to offer all the time. But whatever way you see it, I think most of us would agree that all of these games, regardless of if it's 2D or 3D, are some pure fun. And that always seems to be the forefront of Nintendo's design philosophy. Just make the most fun game possible. And I believe that's what benefits us gamers the most. Both the 2D games and the 3D games will continue to release, and continue to inspire other developers, and continue to captivate players of all ages, myself included. But what are your thoughts? Do you have a preference on 2D or 3D? And what's your favorite Mario game? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below, and thank you so much for watching.